Welcome back to the AME Food Safety Show. Today's topics are earth-shaking, relevant, and necessary for every human who listens to this broadcast. Today's broadcast may change your lifestyle, eating habits, and your attentiveness toward one issue. The main issue of the AME Food Safety Show, that's your food safety as you eat your products to sustain your daily life. My name's Andy Moreno. I'm grateful to be here. I'm also very much inspired by today's topics. Let's begin with the first one, glyphosate residues in human food. Let's talk about where it came from. Where did the chemical composition of this compound come from? Why did glyphosates originate? The origination was the main purpose of helping the Vietnam War fighters. The Vietnam War was from 1955 to 1975. The most intensive period is what we're talking about. The native Vietnamese people, North and South, combined to transfer their necessary warfighting items from North Vietnam, China, and Russia, and transfer them through a series of trails, human-powered, animal-powered trails, to bring their supplies down from the north down to the south. That has been known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail. We called it the Vietnam War. Technically, it was the second Indonesian-Chinese War. The Vietnamese named it very interestingly the Resistance War against America, or the American War. Here in the Central Valley, we have many descendants of people that fought in that war, and they actually won their own independence through a series of battles. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates the type of effort that it took to bring war material down from the north into the fighting regions of the south. What you see here are animals, beasts of burden animals, carrying these supplies, food, ammunition, other war-fighting material. And they were transported from the north to the south, and they used primarily trees and foliage to protect them from the investigations of American aircraft. The trees and foliage in South Vietnam and North were very thick, so they could hide, they could camouflage, and their movements were pretty much unknown for a long time. They needed a solution. So American scientists and engineers came up with the idea of destroying the trees, and then when the target was fully illuminated, they would use wisely their ammunition and destroy that trail of supplies. On the right-hand side, you see a bicycle, which was saddled with supplies. That's a very famous picture. It shows in a Vietnam museum that same bicycle, or a type like it, which actually helped the Vietnamese conquer one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world, the United States. Next slide. This is the focus of this conversation today, this discussion. Number one, these chemical compounds were sprayed from aircraft. I remember very distinctly in the 4th and 5th grade writing a paper about Agent Orange and the effects. Why? Because a lot of my relatives were fighting in those jungles. They were aerosolized from aircraft in a spraying motion along what was then believed to be the Ho Chi Minh Trail. It was identified and labeled as Agent Orange or Herbicide Orange. It was produced primarily for the U.S. military by two companies which are still in existence, Monsanto and Dow. Whenever you hear these two companies, you should not think of only this incident, but there are a wide range of products. It is a herbicide, it kills plants, or it is a defoliant, which destroys the plant's ability to reproduce food for itself by its leaves. It was also known as a war-fighting program. The name of the initial program was known as Operation Ranch Hand. From 61 to 71, that was the most intensive fighting. Why is this important? Next slide. What was the effect of those defoliants? Of course, the intended purpose was to defoliate the forest so they could see the transportation of war material. The secondary effects were absolutely horrible. And I haven't really shown you very many pictures, but I will show you one on the right. It's horrible. These are the genetic effects of the population, the local population. It destroyed the broadleaf, of course. It had birth defects that were absolutely horrible. If you want, you can look them on the internet yourself. They're distressing that our country would impose upon an enemy any type of this type of horrid experience. The negative effects, and that's an example of a drum of Agent Orange because the drums were painted orange, is disastrous. We have that same chemical today, believe it or not, the same historical evidence, the same chemical compositions. If I had a representative here from Monsanto or Dow, they would also say, hey, but Andy, we also offer Roundup. Use it in your yard. That's great, but it's the same intent, the same purpose. It's to destroy leaves of plants that are called broadleafs of that certain variety. And the issue is here is that we now have it modified or monsterized into what's known as genetically modified crops. People call them GMO because of the organisms they produce, they allow to grow more fully. That's like a soybean, a corn, or a cotton. They were designed to resist this particular type of chemical. So what are we saying? The same techniques that were used in Vietnam are used here. It's carpet bombing the entire field. And then the food that has been modified genetically to survive that then can allow to only live. What are the fallouts? Next slide. Well, it's obviously whether you see it through the air or whether you see it through the ground. When you look at a field, and we live here in the Central Valley, we look at fields all the time. We're driving by on the highway. You don't see a weed. And that's not because people are out there picking those weeds. It's because those chemicals that are applied, carte blanche, over the entire surface, kill everything except the specific genetic modified organism that's allowed to live. How does it affect you? Andy, that doesn't affect me at all. Well, the residual of that chemical, that glyphosate chemical, is inside of you when you eat that crop. You say, Andy, that's not possible. My stomach kills it all. That's possible. Think about it. When you eat something, it becomes part of you. It nourishes you. It supplies your genetic material to grow, to survive. So these transgenic crops are designed by engineers. I've seen the engineering, how they do it. They use a machine. The weeds do develop a resistance. All life will eventually overcome an obstacle. So the Roundup Ready must be ready to defeat those increased weeds that develop a resistance. It's natural. So is the residual composition that ends up in your body that you accumulate, is it harmful to you? Next slide. Well, we know Agent Orange. Remember the grandchild of our current Roundup Ready crops? It does cause harm to our vets. I've been in 17 VA hospitals. Anybody out there raise your hand and tell me you've been in more? I see big, strong, historical people walking around on crutches with other remedies. They're seriously ill. And they can link it directly to their experience waiting around in the residual of glyphosates. When you see a crop duster, it's more than likely spraying a Roundup Ready crop. So the Agent Orange caused damage to U.S. troops, a lot of my relatives. Roundup Ready's glyphosates cause damage today to humans. 100 million pounds of glyphosates are applied to, according to the APA, every year to American crops. And guess what? Some of that's ending up in you. Monsanto's Roundup is found in 75% of the air and the water of agricultural areas. And guess what? The San Joaquin Valley is one of the most productive fruits and vegetables and other grain crops here in the world. So think about it. It's in our rain. It's in our water. Here are my recommendations to you. Read carefully before you apply Roundup. You know, the vinegar does the same thing. It destroys broadleaf plants that you spray it on, and that's why organic farmers only use vinegar. But people that like to use glyphosate, they should read that label. Every farmer that uses it has to take a test every year. I don't know if you knew that, in order for them to pass to use it. There are some products out there that were tested by a chemist to make sure that they have been free of glyphosates. That's also good. You can also use the guideline of, hey, I just don't want GMOs in my body. So read the labels, consume the food, but remember to test and verify that it's not there. Very exciting next segment. We're going to talk about diet soda. You're going to love it.